The year is 2007. LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers are off to their first NBA Finals after winning the East, having to beat the Washington Wizards, the New Jersey Nets, and the Detroit Pistons, to then a finals matchup with the San Antonio Spurs, to which San Antonio would come out victorious over the Cavaliers in just 4 games. Over the years, the media and LeBron James fanboys have been trying their hardest to push the fake narrative of LeBron James carrying a trash team to the NBA Finals in 2007. And not only just that team, but really his entire first stint in Cleveland. And in this video, we'll be debunking the lies spread about this underrated Cavaliers team, and we'll be discussing how good this Cleveland squad was, and just how difficult this finals run really was. First thing we're going to discuss is how good this Cavaliers squad was, because trying to accuse this roster as being trash is just ridiculous. Were they the 1996 Chicago Bulls? Absolutely not. Were they the unstoppable Big Three Miami Heat? Not at all. But this roster was far from bad. That year, the Cleveland Cavaliers finished second in the East with 50 wins. They were the 4th best defensive team in the NBA, on top of being the 2nd best rebounding team and 8th in steals. What really carried this Cavaliers team and made them so great was their defense and the ability to shut down opposing teams' offense, as they held opposing teams to only 92.9 points per game and only gave up more than 95 points in a game just 4 times for an entire season. And for all the LeBron James fanboys who will try to say that the defense was only good because of LeBron, here's why that would be incorrect. That year, LeBron James had a defensive rating of 100.3, while his teammates like Anderson Varejao, who had a defensive rating of 98.0, Drew Gooden with a 99.8 defensive rating, and Big Z with a 99.3 defensive rating. So LeBron James only had the 4th best defensive rating on this team. While LeBron James did carry majority of the offensive load, and there's no doubt about his impact on offense, but what made this team so dangerous was how great the defense was. And it helps even more when you have good, solid pieces on the team, such as Donyell Marshall, who was a good shooter, and at the time held the record for most threes in a single game with 12. Larry Hughes, who could be a solid scorer on any night. A good defender who just 2 seasons prior was on the first team all-defense. And you had Big Z, who by that time was a 2-time NBA All-Star. You have Anderson Varejao, who finished top 10 in defense that year. Drew Gooden, who finished top 20 in rebounds and top 15 in defense. Now, this team wasn't a team that was supposed to win, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 8 championships. But this team was well put together with great defensive pieces and solid role players. And then it gets even worse when we compare this team to the competition that was in the East in 2007. One of the craziest takes I have heard is people trying to make it seem like this Cavs team getting through the Eastern Conference to the Finals was some kind of a miracle, as if the Cavs weren't good enough to win the East. In the first round, the Cavaliers played a 41-win Washington Wizards team, a team that had the 3rd worst defense in the NBA, and to make matters even worse, they were missing their best player in Gilbert Arenas due to a torn meniscus in the left knee, and Karen Butler, who was out for 6 weeks with a broken hand, which led to the Cavaliers sweeping the already mid-Washington Wizards in 4 games, no problem, with LeBron James averaging 27 points a game along with Big Z and Larry Hughes averaging 19 each, and Drew Gooden averaging close to 15 and crashing the glass. After the Wizards are put to absolute shame, we move on to the second round to yet another mid-41 win ball club in the New Jersey Nets, who the Cavs would get out of the way in just 6 games, winning 4 games to 2. And after beating an injured Wizards team and then beating another mid-41 win ball club in the New Jersey Nets, we're now in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Detroit Pistons. And this series in particular has a lot of crucial facts missing whenever you hear the LeBron groupies talk about this series, as if this is the same Detroit Pistons team from 2004 that won the championship, and it wasn't. By this time, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year Big Ben Wallace was no longer on the Detroit Pistons anymore. He was playing for the Chicago Bulls and had led them to having the #1 ranked defense in the NBA. Instead, the Pistons replaced Ben Wallace with a washed-up Chris Webber, who was a year away from retirement to try to fill the void of Big Ben Wallace. The Pistons this year were also missing Hall of Fame head coach Larry Brown, who was no longer with the Detroit Pistons organization. This was an older Detroit Pistons team that was left with a 32-year-old Rasheed Wallace, a 33-year-old Chris Webber, and a 33-year-old Antonio McDyess that no longer had their defensive anchor in Ben Wallace and no longer had their Hall of Fame head coach Larry Brown. It's easy to see how this Cavaliers team beat them in 6 games, where LeBron James would feast on Tayshaun Prince and average a cool 25.7 points a game with 9.2 boards and 6.5 assists. The Cavaliers would go on to beat the Pistons 4-2 and would become the Eastern Conference champions. And for the first time in the history of the franchise, the Cavs were on their way to the NBA Finals. They'd be matched up against the San Antonio Spurs, led by veteran Tim Duncan. Now, really quickly, this needs to be said about Tim Duncan. In the year 2007, Tim Duncan was no longer in his prime. As some try to say he was, still a good player, but this wasn't the same Tim Duncan from years prior around the late 90s and early 2000s that was a top 3 player in the NBA. And he didn't have the best performance in the finals when matched up against this Cavaliers team's defense. In the regular season, Tim Duncan had a 54% field goal percentage, but in the NBA Finals, that percentage dropped by 10% to 44%. And in that year, the average league true shooting percent was 54%, and in the finals, Tim Duncan was held to 48%, a below-league average percent. But you can credit the defense of the Cavs, along with acknowledging that Tim Duncan didn't perform great in that series. To further credit how good this Cavalier defense was against the Spurs, in the regular season, the San Antonio Spurs averaged 98.5 points a game, and in the playoffs, they dropped by almost a full 3 points and averaged 95.7 points a game. But in the NBA Finals, the Cavs held the Spurs to just 86.5 points a game in the finals, almost a 10-point drop-off from what they averaged in the playoffs. So when you factor all that in, along with the fact that the Cleveland Cavaliers held the highest rating for opposing teams' points allowed, then it's no way that you can say that the Cavs had no chance of winning any of those finals games, like some fanboys try to do when they try to lie about how good this team really was. And one thing we have to point out about this finals series, the biggest problem as to why the Cleveland Cavaliers couldn't so much as win 1 game in this series was because of the offense. And when I say offense, I'm not talking about the solid pieces and role players that this team had this year. I'm talking about LeBron James in this series averaging 22 points, 7 rebounds, 6.8 assists on 35% shooting from the field, and 20% shooting from the long ball line, while also averaging around 6 turnovers a game on below-league average true shooting percentage. Game 1, the final score was 76-85. LeBron James scored 14 points, shooting .416 from the field on 39% true shooting, with 6 turnovers, 4 dimes, and despite LeBron James underperforming, it was still a 9-point game. In Game 2, the only game where the Cavs lost by double digits in a 92-103 loss, LeBron had 25 points on 42% field goal percentage, shooting 9 for 21, and finishing with another inefficient game as he finished with 48% true shooting. Another inefficient game for LeBron. Game 3, the Cavs would fall short in a close game by 3 points, 72-75. LeBron shoots 39% from the field on 9 for 23 shooting and 47% true shooting. 5 turnovers and missed a 3-pointer that would have tied the game up. And in Game 4, the Cavaliers would lose to the Spurs by 1 point, 82-83, and in this game, LeBron James shot 33% from the field on 10 for 30 shooting and 33% from the free throw line, shooting 2 for 6 with 6 turnovers and 36% true shooting, in a game where he only needed 2 more points to win. To then, the San Antonio Spurs would come out victorious in 4 games over the Cavaliers, and really quickly, just to address another false narrative put out by casual fans that think LeBron James was blitzed and double-teamed or triple-teamed the entire time. That's not true in the slightest bit. Bruce Bowen was guarding LeBron James throughout this series, and the game plan was to go under the screens and make LeBron James shoot the ball, and they helped on defense when LeBron tried to attack the basket. Bruce Bowen did a good job pressuring LeBron throughout this series. In the 2007 Finals, LeBron became the only player to shoot under 40% from the field with 5+ turnovers a game in an NBA Finals, and he was well beyond those minimum requirements. And the 2007 Cavs were the only team since the 1987 Lakers to face 2 500 or worse teams to make the finals. So when people try to make it seem like it was some sort of miracle that this team made it to the finals this year, is one of the most ridiculous and almost laughable takes to make once you really look back at what actually happened and the type of team LeBron had around him that year. Now really quickly before we wrap up this video, I just want to ask you guys this, because some people try to make the take that other players would not be able to take this team to the finals in 2007. So I just want to ask you guys this. If you were to take Michael Jordan, the greatest player of all time, and give him a top 4 defensive team in the NBA and match him up against the same competition that LeBron played in the playoffs, do you think he would take this team to the finals? How about Kobe Bean Bryant? 22-year-old Kobe Bryant, who absolutely torched the league in 2001. If you give him a top 4 defensive team in the NBA and match him up against the same competition that LeBron's seen in the East in 2007, do they make the finals? Let me know your thoughts. Anyways, guys, that's it for this video, and I will be having more longer form content dropping on this channel soon. I appreciate you guys watching, and if you enjoyed this video or basketball discussion, then leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.